Bombay. I went to undergrad school in Mumbai, and then I went to Japan for 2 years. I learned Japanese language. Then I went to the United States.
Wow.
I did a master's in business administration, and then another master's in information systems. I am also working as a part-time professor in one of the biggest universities in Canada, and I do that on a part-time basis for 1 or 2 semesters in a year. So,
if any student approaches you regarding he wants to or she wants to see her or his future in this stream, what might be the reason of opting this specialization for their career? ಹಾಯ್ ಹಲೋ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ. ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಹೇಗಿದ್ದೀರಿ? ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಆರಾಮಾಗಿದ್ದೀರಿ ಅಂದ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಮನೆ ಸಾಧಕರ ವಿಭಾಗವನ್ನು ಶುರು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಜ್ಞಾನವೇ ಬೆಳಕಿನ ಮೂಲ, ಬೆಳಕಿನ ಮೂಲವೇ ಶಿಕ್ಷಕರು. ಸೊ ಜ್ಞಾನವನ್ನು ಹರಡ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಆದರ್ಶ ಶಿಕ್ಷಕರು ನಮ್ಮ ಜೊತೆ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಮ್ಯಾಥ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಷನ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮನ್ನು ಸತತವಾಗಿ 24 ವರ್ಷಗಳಿಂದನೂ ಕೂಡ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಒಬ್ಬರು ಶಿಸ್ತಿನಿಂದ ಪಾಠ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸೊ ಇಂತಹ ಆದರ್ಶ ಶಿಕ್ಷಕರನ್ನ ಪರಿಚಯಿಸುವ ಸಣ್ಣ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ನಮ್ಮ ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಬನ್ನಿ ಸಾಯಿ ವೆಮುಲಕೊಂಡ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಪರಿಚಯ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಣ, ಅವರ ಸಾಧನೆಗೆ ಒಂದು ನಮನವನ್ನು ಮಾಡೋಣ. ನಮಸ್ತೆ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್.
Namaste.
How are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing good, thank you. First of all, a warm welcome for our channel, Udeshadali Jeevana. You might be viewing our channel from long back.
Yes.
Alright, and we are doing a small podcast about achievers in and around GTA, who are inspired people for many of their life, right?
Thank
so
you.
You are considered as a good and a very positive achiever for many people in and around the world. So
Thank you.
This video motto is to pass the information for many students who are there, who are willing to come and continue their education here too, and the current students who are here, let them get a pretty information from your end.
Sure.
So we welcome to our channel and our team.
Thank you. I'm glad to share the information with you. Whatever I know, I'll try to share it with you.
Yes, thank you so much for your time and your patience. Yes, Professor, the very first question which comes up in my mind is, where are you from? And how was your childhood days? And which field did you pursue as an educational background? And when did you visit to Canada? A small intro from your end.
Actually, I'm originally from Bombay. My hometown is Bombay.
Wow.
Even though my parents are from southern India, they're from Andhra Pradesh, but basically they worked all their life in Bombay. So Mumbai, as it's called now, is my hometown. So I went to undergrad school in Mumbai, and then I went to Japan for 2 years. I learned Japanese language. Then I went to the United States.
Wow.
I did a master's in business administration, and then another master's in information systems. And then I worked there for a very short while, and then I came to Canada, and I worked for the Toronto Transit Commission, which is basically running the metro here. So I worked for them, and then afterwards there was a teaching job that came up in one of the provincial colleges here, which I'll talk about. It was like a degree college.
Yes.
It gives a bachelor's and diplomas and all that, but it does not give masters. At that time it didn't give. Now it gives in a few fields. So I applied where in September of 2000 I was accepted. So I've been teaching in that college since September of 2000. I am also working as a part-time professor in one of the biggest universities in Canada, and I do that on a part-time basis for 1 or 2 semesters in a year. So it's not all around the year, but 1 or 2 semesters.
Right.
So I do that. So basically I'm teaching mostly the informatics courses and the math courses, and these are oriented towards the students who may be completing these courses as a requirement for a bigger part of their program. So what do you mean by that? So suppose, let's say there's a nursing student.
Correct.
So the focus of the nursing student is on studying nursing courses, but they have to take a math course or an informatics course as a part of the requirement. So that's where I come into the picture, and that's what we do.
What sparked you to select math and combination with information system?
Actually, I was working in the IT field. Before I came into teaching, I was working in the IT field, and so that's where the majority of jobs were there. When I started working, which is in the late 90s.
Right.
So that's where the majority of, so that's why I studied information systems, because a lot of jobs in there. And even now, majority of the jobs are in the world of information systems, but the information systems world as we know it now has changed a lot compared to that time. But coming back to your question,
Right.
I studied information systems and math because they go both hand in hand, and around that time there are a lot of jobs in those fields.
I'm very curious to know what is an intersection between, what's the combination between math and information system?
So basically, the world of information systems derives its foundations from mathematics. So anybody who is good in mathematics will automatically do well in information systems.
Right.
That doesn't mean that people who don't have a math background will not do well in information systems. But those who have a background in mathematics, it has been found that they find it easy to study information systems because of the complexity of some of the information system processes are akin to math. So if somebody is doing well in math, they'll find it easy to understand the complexities of information systems and understand that field and work well. So
Yes.
it doesn't necessarily mean they have to have a math background, but the math background always helps.
Professor, as you pointed out, complexity, right?
Yeah.
So, being a professor, what strategies do you adopt to teach a complex mathematics as a simple one to students?
Well, the idea is try to understand the background of the student and try to translate that using examples from what they. For example, when we're teaching in the world of nursing, where we're teaching information systems.
Right.
So I basically teach in the School of Nursing. So basically, when I'm teaching in the School of Nursing, we are basically focusing on the application of information systems to nurses. So we are not teaching them a lot about the programming or a lot about the database or a lot about cloud computing and all that, because they're not into designing the programs per se,
Wow.
but they're working with all the companies that are designing the programs and using them to their field of work, which is nursing, right? So basically, when I'm teaching an informatics course to a nurse, I'm basically trying to understand where the nurse will use this informatics course and how do I teach it using the examples that they will use in their professional life. Now, we talked about math. So when we
Yes.
talk about math, again, when we're talking about the field of nursing, how are they going to use math? So basically, they're using math for dosage calculation.
Wow.
So that's the number one field of application, right?
Right.
Because if a nurse gives a wrong dosage of medication to a patient,
that will be like a very big problem,
that,
right?
as you said, absolutely,
Yes.
it'll be a big problem.
Yes.
So basically, trying to understand why they need to understand the math calculation
Right.
in their field of study. So that's very important. So try to explain to the student where they're going to use the concept in their professional life. It doesn't have to be math or information system.
Correct.
It can be anything.
Right.
So where they're going to use that concept that you're going to teach them in their world of professional work.
Right.
So that's very important. And when you're trying to teach it from that angle, it becomes very interesting for them.
Right, you have been come across, and we have been studied in India. We have seen the environment of college or the university and the classroom environment.
That's it.
A professor used to come, stand beside the podium, have a couple of reports or the sources, and he used to start the presentations. How will be here in North America region or in US?
Well, here it's a little bit different. Basically, it's basically the same, but there are some big differences in the sense that I haven't taught in India for a long while, so I don't know how it is. But here the idea is that we basically try to incorporate in all our classes whatever is happening in the industry.
Right.
Into each and every class. So even if we are teaching, let's say, information systems in the world of healthcare, right? Every year it's changing. So I may have taught this class for the last 5, 10, 15 years, but when I go to teach it this year or next year, basically we do bring those reports and presentations that you talked about, but they are more linked to kind of where we are using those in terms of the changes that happened in the last year or this year or 2 years ago, right? And how they are related to the work of the student in the next year. So basically teaching from the point of view of practical application or teaching from the point of view of the latest technology.
Right.
So what is the latest technology that they're going to use, or how the technology is changing and what they. So that's the basic focus. So it's not just teaching from a point of view of understanding the concept, but basically making the student apply that concept.
Right.
And trying to understand how this new technology or new field of study will help them apply that concept. So that's very important from a teaching perspective,
Right.
because that's when the students will be more interested to learn what you're going to teach them in the class.
Very curious, Professor. Being a professor, how do you upgrade or update yourself regarding mathematical accreditation every day with application of information system while teaching towards the students?
Basically, there are two things that need to happen. First is you need to understand what is happening in the industry, right? And try to make sure how you're going to translate that into the profession. So, for example, nowadays, a lot of the math calculations that I talked about the field of healthcare, that the students in the field of healthcare do, they're using the information systems tools to basically verify what they have done in terms of calculations, right? So, basically, we want to make sure that they have done those kind of applications in the class so that they understand how they can use this transferable skill to work in their profession. So it's very important to understand that what you're teaching in the class will help them in their profession. So that's very important. And whatever the changes are, so for example, to give you a very simple idea, back to about 15 years ago, most of the charts that the nurses used were all paper based. And now if you look at North America, there is not a single paper based chart. Everything is technology. So if the nurse has to use some information system skills, they have to be able to gather that information from the chart that they open, and the chart is displayed on an informatics systems tool. So it's basically called the electronic health record. So they'll pull up the patient's electronic health record and look at all the medications that they need to give, and then they need to look at the calculations and make sure that their calculations are aligned with the health condition of the student. So that's very important. So the point I'm trying to make is that trying to understand the tools that they're using and how the tools apply in the world of healthcare, and trying to make the student understand that.
How does data science is interrelated to information systems, Professor?
Well, data science is very important because basically all the data that we are capturing now is much more than what used to happen, let's say 2 years ago or 5 years ago or something. So if you look at the data that was captured 5 years ago, right, the data that we're capturing today is at least 5,000 times more than what we captured 5 years ago. Because nowadays we are getting data from a lot of sources that are not there 5 years ago. So for example, a lot of data is generated from smartwatches in the world of healthcare, right? And that is being shared with the healthcare profession. So this wasn't happening 5 or 10 years ago because a lot of people didn't have smartwatches. Right? Right now in the world of information systems and healthcare, we have some sensors that are there in the bed. So we have a smart bed system. So the bed is going to calculate how many times the patient tossed and turned, how many times they got up or they did get up, right? Did they snore, or what was the noise level? So all this information is now being fed into the information systems, and they may or may not use it, but in terms of absolute data collection, lot of new sources of data are there now that weren't there 5 years ago. So every year I can safely say, compared to last year, the amount of data that we are collecting has gone up by many different levels, right? So if you're thinking that the data we are collecting this year is 100%, next year it may be 200, 300, 400, 500%. And if you're going 5 years down the road, it is going to be exponential increase in the amount of data. So then the problem comes, how do we use all this data, right? So the data may not be used at the same time. Like you will not use each and every piece of data that you're collecting, right? But the point is you're storing it because you never know when in the future you may need it. So you can get the data from disparate sources together depending on the project, and then you may use it or you may not use it, but you still store it in a data warehouse.
So how does artificial intelligence or machine learning will have a greater impact on information systems?
Well, machine learning basically is used for 2 or 3 areas now that are very popular. So the first one that we all know is ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is basically what it's doing. It is looking at all the information that is available there and the information that you give, and then it's matching the information that is available with the information that you are giving to generate an answer for you. So that's one area. But the area, and it's become very popular now because a lot more people are using this generative AI. The ChatGPT is part of generative AI now than they probably used 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, because it's not very popular. But the other areas of information systems that are already been there for many years, right? Those areas are still working in the background, and a lot of people don't know about that. For example, in the field of healthcare, what information systems has been doing in terms of using artificial intelligence for many years. ChatGPT has come now, but this has been going on for the past 5, 10, 15 years, is that if I'm a healthcare professional, I can't read all the papers that are published in my field of study.
What might be the reason, Professor?
Because human beings, they got limited time.
Oh.
So suppose I'm a doctor or a healthcare professional and you come to see me as a patient,
Right.
So I will not have time to read all the latest developments in the field of treatment that I'm going to give you.
Oh.
So this is where artificial intelligence comes in.
Correct.
Because it will guide the healthcare professional as to what is the line of treatment depending on the parameters that I will put as a doctor or a nurse or any other kind of healthcare professional, depending on your condition, and then it will suggest what needs to be done. So nobody will be able to read like 700 papers or 800 papers every year in addition to working. So that's
That
where
is true.
artificial intelligence has been working in the background.
Right.
Now, where artificial intelligence has made a difference is that it has educated the patient into what their condition is and what their different avenues of treatment is, in terms of giving them the knowledge that they didn't have 5-10 years ago. So for example, if you're a patient, you can ask ChatGPT, I have this condition, what are certain lines of treatment?
Right.
So the artificial intelligence tool will tell you as a patient what are certain lines. But there has been a problem with this, because what has happened is that some of the patients have gone to meet the healthcare professionals,
Yes.
and they have challenged them, why I'm not getting this line of treatment.
Wow.
And the reason for that is that Chat GPT and these other tools, the information that they give you
Yes.
is not 100% correct all the time.
Wow.
Because if it were correct, then we didn't have doctors or nurses who need to go to medical college and nursing school for so many years, and everybody can become a doctor and nurse just by using Chat GPT,
Exactly.
right? So
Everyone rely on it, right?
that's
now.
right. So the point is, you can rely on them, but you have to be careful because they're not correct all the time. Sometimes they give you half-baked knowledge. So depending on what you're asking and what you're getting, I mean, it's always good to educate ourselves, but it may not be 100% correct all the time. So you cannot challenge the healthcare professional based on what you learned from chat. I mean, you can educate yourself to gain more knowledge about your condition and avenues of treatment, but it's not a substitute for the doctor or the nurse's knowledge.
Wow.
Right? So that's very important.
You brought out a very good information, and it's really touching one, right?
Yeah.
So it's a good input where you are giving out to audience. Right, as per your experience, or a long experience of 24 years, it's not so easy, Professor.
Yeah, thank
so, if any student approaches you regarding he wants to or she wants to see her or his future in this stream, what might be the reason of opting this specialization for their career?
Well, first thing is the world of information systems, the jobs are always going to be there.
Wow.
And the second thing is that a lot of countries, Canada included, as you know, they placed restrictions in the last 2-3 years on international students coming to Canada. Canada has changed, I can tell you, in the last 12 to 18 months, a lot of the regulations. I don't know all the regulations offhand off the top of my head, but what I can tell you is that they have made it more difficult now to study here and get a work permit after studying as compared to 5 years or even 3 years ago. That's because of the pressure on the housing market. A lot of students used to come here, and local Canadians, they did not get houses on rent easily back to 5 years ago when we compare it with today, because of a lot of so because of that, like all the countries, Canada has also made changes. So you're asking me what are the career choices. So if I'm a student planning to come to Canada, first of all, I would go to the Government of Canada website and see that whether my field of study is aligned with and interest, of course, is aligned with whatever field the jobs are there. So what do I mean by that? So if I'm a foreign student trying to come to Canada, I would like to study in a field that has a job that is listed on the shortage list. So the Government of Canada produces a list of shortage of people that they need. And if you study in that particular area, it's easy to get a work permit. Now they have made it very difficult to get a work permit, even if you're a master's or doctor's student, forget if you're a bachelor student. So if I'm planning to study in Canada, they put some additional requirements in terms of money, in terms of the institution that you come and what kind of documentation you need. And even after you study from here, if you want a postgraduate work permit, they have made it difficult in the sense that you need to apply for a work permit in those fields of study. So basically, back to 3 years ago or back to even 2 years ago, anybody who graduated from any institution in Canada, postgraduate, whether private or public college,
Right.
they are automatically qualified for getting a work permit.
Wow.
But now, even if you went for a government college, a public college,
Yes.
or a public university,
Yes.
even there they put a restriction. For example, the work permit that you can get will be available only if you study in a certain line. Not only that, they also put some language requirements which
Wow.
weren't there. So if I went to college or university in Canada, obviously I studied in the English language, right? English is the medium of instruction.
Yes.
But now what the government has done, if you want to get a work permit after studying, so let's say you came to Canada from India and you spent, I don't know, maybe $60,000, $70,000, $80,000,
Right.
and you want to recover some of that money and also gain some experience. So previously, automatically you qualified for an open work permit
Yes.
for 2-3. But
Exactly.
now they made a restriction that if you want to apply for a work permit after studying, they put certain conditions. And like I said, if you are going to work in one of those fields where there is a shortage of jobs,
Yes.
then it's easy for you to get a work permit.
Right.
Luckily for us, we've been talking about math and information systems.
Yes.
So a lot of those jobs in math and information systems, they do qualify in that shortage list. So it's easier to get a work permit
Yes.
in that field of study,
Right.
and work in that field of study,
Yes.
right, rather than some other area.
Yes.
But even then, if you're an international student coming to Canada, I would say that you have to go through all this information
Right.
very diligently, because it's changing very quickly.
Correct.
And there are a lot of changes, so
Yeah.
it's very important to do that. And then you should not believe what the agents may tell you. So who are these agents? So agents are basically the people who are residing in India. So they are like a liaison between you and the university or college.
Right.
So you cannot believe 100% of the time what they say. You have to do your own study. It's called buyer beware in the world of marketing. So you have to do
This
it.
is a beautiful point where you pointed
Yeah.
out. It's very informative for students who are really wanted to visit over here and see that career. Professor, if I ask some question like, what are the challenges being a professor? What are the challenges do you face while teaching?
Well, the challenges that you face while teaching is compared to India here, the power relationship that exists between the professor and the student, that kind of power relationship is not there to that extent here.
Well, can you please brief it out?
Yeah, what I mean is that, of course, I went to school in India for 40 years ago, so a lot of things
Correct.
have changed in India.
Yes.
But in India, the student will not challenge you in the class.
Right.
Whereas here, even though you're a professor, you cannot walk into the class and expect that the student will accept 100% what you say verbatim, right? So they may challenge you. The power equation is different.
Right.
So if you make a mistake in the class, like I have done many times in 24 years of teaching,
Wow.
you have to be ready to apologize and make sure you have to be honest and tell that maybe you shared something that wasn't correct, and then make a correction, right? So those kind of things. So the other thing is that here you always expect the students to bring to them. You have to bring to them whatever is the latest thing in the industry.
Oh.
So that means
Updated information.
Updated. So as a professor, you are always studying all the time. Maybe not as much as what you did in your master's program or bachelor,
God.
but you still have to keep studying. So that's
Right.
very important.
Right.
It's very important to keep studying all the time, because you're going to take it to the class.
So what sort of strategies do you adopt to make students very comfortable in the classroom?
Well, first of all, you have to make sure that you bring out their experiences, their life experience and their study experience, and incorporate that into the class.
Wow.
So what do you mean by that? So let's say we are talking about developing an app, a healthcare app, right?
Right.
So you're going to go to the class and you're going to ask the student, as a patient, where do you think you're going to use the healthcare app?
Right.
Where do you think you're going to use the healthcare app? So you're going to ask about that, and then you're going to take it from there, and then from that you're going to draw on the student. You're going to draw on the student and let them know the student's experience, how if the student came on the other side, instead of a patient, he is a software developer, how he or she is going to work as a software developer to develop the patient's app.
Wow.
Because the patient already knows one side
Exactly.
of the app, right?
Yes.
Which is the user side. So as a manufacturer or maker of the app, how are you going to incorporate the user's experience? So you slowly draw the student and use the transferable skill from being a user of the app into one who is developing. So basically try to involve the patient from the other side. So that's very important. So I just gave you one example. So the idea is to make the student understand the perspective of whatever they're going to do from the other side, and then bridge those two perspectives together.
Right. So interrelation, what or the inter coordination between the professor and student is it very important here, or
Very
is,
important.
being a strict professor, you design the curriculum, you are okay, you are free to for the marks or assess the performance of the students. How does it go in this case?
So 2-3 important things you raised.
Right.
One is every student here, they gets a survey on your class.
Wow.
Every semester.
Right.
So based on what they answered in the survey, you keep changing the course as you go forward. You may not change 100% of the course next year, but you keep incorporating some of the changes that they requested. The other thing is that you talked about marks. So in Canada, there is a contract between you and the student. It's called a course outline. So the course outline tells very strictly how the student is going to be assessed in terms of the exams, in terms of the essays they write, in terms of the papers they write, in terms of presentations. You cannot change it. Once it's published, you got to stick to that. At least you can't change it in the middle of the semester. You can change it next year or the year after looking at the survey. So that's very important.
Yes.
Right? So those kind of things. The second thing is the power dynamics, like I said.
Yes. That's very important.
Different here compared to India.
Right.
So the student has a lot more say, has a lot more flexibility while talking to the professor here than compared to India, right?
Yes.
Than compared to India. So that's very important to keep in mind. I know in India now the situation is different from 30-40 years ago when I was a student. Even there the power dynamics have changed. But in the Western countries, the student has a lot more power than the student in India, right?
How easy is it to get a job as a professor in North America region?
Okay, very good question you asked.
Yes.
So right now, compared to when I joined 24 years ago, the requirements have become much more strict.
Wow.
So what do I mean by that? For example, 24 years ago, if you're applying for a teaching job in a degree college, not a university, but a degree college which offers a diploma and a 3 years degree and all that,
Right.
you basically needed a master's.
Exactly.
And you didn't need a PhD. But right now they're asking for PhDs in most of the degree colleges also, unless you're going to teach in an applied field. What do I mean by that? So let's say, so suppose you're teaching in School of Nursing, so then you don't have to have a PhD per se. I mean, it's good to have a PhD, but if you're a nurse and you have a master's in nursing, you can still apply for the job.
Wow.
But in most of the cases, in 90% of the teaching jobs, I would say close to 95%, you do need a PhD. It's only those 5% of the areas like nursing and certain specialized areas where PhD is preferred but not required, as long as you have a master's in that line of work.
Right.
But as far as teaching job is concerned, 95% of the time, they require you to have a PhD in that line of work.
Yes, Professor, I'm very curious. I don't know how the junior is this question, but I wanted to clarify my doubt. So here I have heard few things like examination will be like open book.
Yes,
one,
absolutely.
right? Is it true, or if so, how well a student can prepare himself or herself to appear for the examination? Since it's an open book one, it's easy. I hope so.
It is an open book. I don't know whether it's easy. Normally, open book exams are more difficult than closed book.
Wow.
Because open book means the question will not be directly related to what you study on page number. Let's say page 95 of a certain chapter. You studied something from the book.
Right.
So it's not straight, like it's application of that concept.
Right.
So even though you may have the book in front of you, you have the theory, but you don't have the application.
Exactly.
So open book exams normally they are there in few of the courses. Even I use them in my courses.
Wow.
But the questions are much more difficult than closed book exam, because closed book exam, they know you can't refer to any book or any internet resource or anything, right? So basically it's you and the question paper,
right.
Whether it's digital or on paper, right? So open book exam is different in the sense, in the open book exam, they ask the question, but it's not just writing out what's there in the book.
Right.
It's more of applying that concept, so it becomes much more difficult.
So what is the
from the
process
student's point of view?
What is the process of appointing any candidate as a professor in any college here?
Okay, so there is 2 or 3 different things that happen. One is when you go for a job interview, it's not one interview, it's a set of 6 or 7 interviews.
It's nothing but a corporate interview what you're speaking about.
Yeah. So first of all, what will happen is you're interviewed by your colleagues, the people with whom you're working.
Wow.
Right? So that's just like a formal interview, I had to look at your personality, to language skills,
Right.
how
Right.
you interact with the people in a company.
Exactly.
Secondly, they're going to ask you to teach a class.
They won't.
And when they ask you to teach a class, all these people that you interviewed with, they'll be sitting in the class along with the students.
Wow.
So then they're going to look at how you taught the class, how you interacted with the students and all that. So that is over. And then there is an interview with the management.
Wow.
So then there is the interview with the management. So first interview was with your colleagues, second with the students, and then there's an interview with the management. So that happens. So then here basically the management is going to look at how valuable you are for them. So how many papers you publish. So you talked about the world of teaching, getting a job in the world of teaching. So there is a mantra there. It's called publish or perish.
Yes.
So if you don't publish the papers as a professor, you're going to lose your tenure, which is basically telling you that you have a permanent job teaching in that department. That's called tenure.
Yes.
So if you don't publish, you're not going to get tenure, or if you got the tenure, you have to keep publishing certain amount of papers. So this third interview which I talked about, which you're having with the management, is basically talking about that aspect, the aspect of publication. So if you're a well-published author, right, you may not be in the teaching line, you may be, for example, in the industry, and you're coming to the teaching line.
That will add on weightage.
Yeah, add on weightage and a better chance of getting a teaching job rather than somebody who has got a degree, bachelor's, master's and PhD but never published.
Nice.
So they probably won't get the job, as opposed to somebody who has published a lot of papers.
What if any candidate who doesn't have fluency in English but have a thorough knowledge in the subject, will he be appointed as a professor in the college?
No. As far as I know, in the college and university, so language proficiency is very important. Right. So what will happen is that I can tell you this. So suppose you don't have a PhD, right? But you have a lot of publications.
Right.
So you may be given a teaching job contingent on the condition that you will get your PhD within X number of years, 3 years, 5 years or something.
Wow.
At the same time, you are going to do your publications and do the teaching, but you will get your tenure only after you get your PhD.
Wow.
Right?
Interesting.
So even when you get your tenure, so let's say you've been teaching in a university for 3 years, and then you got your PhD between years 3 to 5. So at the end of 5 years, when you get your tenure, there is another interview.
Wow.
With all the people that you've been teaching with. Of course, they're your friends, and then there may be some other people from different parts of the university.
Correct.
So that another interview will be there.
Wow.
So that's very important.
Wow. So as per your experience, what do you say a few inputs for buddy students and buddy teachers who are upcoming to North America region?
Yeah. Buddy students, the thing that I would say is that you want to be very careful about which line of study you pick and where you go to study, because that's going to have a bearing on what you are going to study and what you are going to achieve in your life. So do your study, do your work, do your due diligence.
Right.
So that's very important, right? And then as far as colleagues are concerned, if you're looking for a teaching job, very important to be proficient in the language that you're teaching. So in Canada, you're going to have French language universities and English language universities. So if you're teaching in a English medium, it's very important to have fluency. Secondly, if you're coming into the teaching line, very important to have a good list of publications that you've done.
Yes.
So you have to do some research.
Yes.
Have all your educational qualifications like bachelor's, master's and PhD and all that.
Right.
And always in this line, if there is one thing that I can tell you, if you're coming into the teaching line, it is a long list of publications and studies that you have to do. So if you're looking to earn your living in this line for 25 to 30 years, you have to be studying for 25 to 30 years for the latest developments in this field. So the studying never stops, even though you're teaching.
Never ending,
learning never ends. So that's very important.
So if I ask you a very last question, that how satisfied are you in your profession?
Well, for me, it has been an ideal profession. I always tell myself I'm in the best job possible. So you have to love what you're doing. That's very important. And I always love going to the class. I don't know about others in this
We
line.
used to say, please love the subject, subject will love you.
That's it. Absolutely.
same
Please
mantra,
love
right?
subject. And when you enter the class, you forget all the worries of the world.
Wow.
Because those 2-3 hours that you spend in the classroom, they are the best time that you have in the day, because you are one with the students and one with the subject that you're teaching. So it's very de-stressing for you in the sense that you forget all the problems of the world when you enter the classroom.
Yes, Professor, you give a lot of input
Thank you.
in this conversation. I hope you also enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. I
But
did.
it was really informative. I usually ask a last question for all achievers that how was our conversation today?
Thank
To your personal feedback to me and towards the
That's
audience
very good.
about our conversation.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for asking all very relevant questions. So I enjoyed it very much. Thank you for your questions that were very pointed. You know, they were very broad in the sense that they gave a 360-degree view.
Oh my
so
God.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
So you are a beloved professor in North America region,
Thank
including me. You are an inspiration for
Thank
many
you.
of them's life, right? You have an abundant of knowledge in not only in your stream, but in every areas where I personally experienced talking to you. So only I can say is I wish let your dreams come true and success will be always with you. So I wish you good luck for your future endeavors.
Thank you. Appreciate all your good wishes.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much.